The Galaxy S8, Samsung's latest flagship S-line phone, is quite impressive. A huge 18.5 by 9 infinity display, a 3000 mAh battery, 64 gigs of storage, and 4 gigs of RAM are some of the many things that make this phone stand out from the crowd. But it doesn't come without its faults, such as poor fingerprint sensor placement, a completely pointless Bixby button, the oh-so-terrible TouchWiz UI, and a less than stellar upgrade timeline. Some things that really shouldn't be happening on a flagship device, but still are. Will these make or break the deal on this new Samsung device? Stay tuned. Hey guys, it's Wired here, and today we'll be reviewing the Samsung Galaxy S8, a great phone with some compromises. The Galaxy S8 was released in April of this year, around half a year ago. It came at a price of around $800-900 US, although nowadays it can be found for around $630 US or 850 Canadian. It comes packed with 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage, and a Snapdragon 835 or Exynos 8895 processor. My device comes with the Snapdragon 835, which is odd because the Snapdragon 835 is supposed to be for US models, but I live in Canada. Either chips are good choices, both performing extremely well in benchmarks and in everyday usage, so you shouldn't worry about which chip you have. And it's also packed in a massive 5.8-inch 2960 by 1440p screen, curved, AMOLED, and vibrant as ever. Powering this display is an Adreno 540 or Mali G71 GPU, which performs stellar in games. To top it all off, it's rocking a sizable 3000 mAh battery, which, unfortunately, barely keeps the phone afloat the entire day. These specs sound like they add up to quite a beast, but we'll just have to see. Specs don't mean everything after all. The port selection on the S8 is appreciated. The S8 comes with a USB-C fast charging port, which gets me full juice in about an hour and a half. It also comes with a very appreciated headphone jack. In this day and age, a headphone jack seems to be something of old, but it's nice to always have options. On the right side, you'll find a power button, pretty standard, and on the left side, you'll have the volume rockers and the dreaded Bixby button. I would go on about how bad the Bixby button is, but since launch, Samsung has actually improved its functionality, meaning I can now disable it and forget it ever existed. But Bixby isn't the only one of Samsung's slightly annoying software features, however. The S8 comes with its own Android skin and software suite, which I recommend never using. The TouchWiz launcher is fine, it mimics stock Android well, but the fact that I have a different launcher installed should show how long it managed to keep my attention, which is not long. I've also replaced all the Samsung apps with the stock Google alternatives, with the exception being the camera app. I do think Google Camera is pretty nice, but there's just more control I have with the Samsung stock camera app. A general recommendation for those who care: uninstall the stock apps that you can, disable those that you can't, and force stop and never reopen those remaining. That way, those apps won't waste background processing power as you use much more, in my opinion, refined Google apps. If you are an avid user of Samsung applications, this won't be a problem, but coming from a Nexus 5, stock Android was always my thing. So these apps aren't what I'll be using. As for the Samsung skin, it's not that great, but it isn't a huge deviation from Google stock, so it's manageable. One annoying thing though, the S8 and S8 Plus are both stuck on Android 7.0 and won't get updated to Android Oreo until early next year, which sucks. The beta program for Oreo did come out for the S8, which supposedly included North America. Problem is, I guess North America only means the US. Canada is left out. So those are the specs and hardware, but here comes the question: how does the S8 perform? Well, in a word, rather admirably. The 835 does well to power the phone through everyday tasks, and even does its part in more intensive things, such as video rendering. Running a quick Geekbench benchmark yielded results of around 1900 single-core score and a 6200 multi, which is pretty powerful. I don't do too much work on my phone, mostly saving that for sit-down PC work, so I'm not sure if it performs that well for rendering or video editing, but those aren't really things that should be the main focus when getting a new phone. Gaming is great as well, and while my library of games hasn't grown much since my Nexus 5 review, its specs should give good performance throughout. Multitasking is great, with 4 gigs of RAM doing a decent job of holding apps awake before having to clear them from memory. Its large screen also means great split screen performance, which I actually found myself using from time to time. In fact, part of this review was even written on the phone in split screen mode with the YouTube video open as the other app. There is one huge flaw for the S8 though, and that's battery life. Its 3000 mAh battery, while sounding decently large, barely gets me through a day of moderate use. I usually end up charging it when I get home, but it's enough to last me without a charge most of the time. Now this is almost with full brightness, full resolution, and battery saver off. If I took the time to tweak things, the battery could be much better, and in fact, I've gotten up to 5 hours of screen on time before. Usually though, it averages around 3 hours of screen on time. Occasionally less, occasionally more. But for a flagship device, this is just average. Although with 3000 mAh, I would have expected a bit more. Overall, the battery life on the phone is depressing, and the S8 with its 3500 mAh battery seems to be a much better offer, even if you don't want that huge display. The S8 just simply doesn't last a full day, like ever. Now with performance aside, we can get into the aesthetics of the device. The S8 is clean, like really clean. It sports a glass front and back, which, while being a fingerprint magnet, are really clean and nice looking. Its metal band around the edges is really clean as well. The curved screen is also really clean, and it's potentially one of the best flagship screens yet, even months after its launch. Its minimal bezels are appreciated, and while aesthetically, the chin doesn't look as good as maybe the iPhone X, with a more balanced bezel design, it's actually useful for me. I find it a lot easier to reach my home button or navigation buttons with a slight bezel, so it gets a check mark there. So, how do the pictures look, you might ask? The cameras on the S8 are a 12 megapixel f1.7 rear shooter and an 8 megapixel f1.7 front, and they take nice photos. The back camera can get a good shot in pretty much every time when the lighting is nice, and it performs admirably in low light as well. In fact, I'd say that I would prefer to take the S8 to take pictures instead of a DSLR, just because of how good the photos are. The videos are great too, with OIS in the rear lens and software image stabilization for both. The front camera can shoot 1440p 30fps, and the rear camera can do 4K at 30 or 1080p at 60. Like, it's raining so hard, there's no sun out anywhere, but the camera is still doing pretty well. You can see it darkens as the sky gets brighter, and it keeps everything very visible. It's pretty good. The optical image stabilization is pretty good as well. My hands are pretty shaky and I'm walking, and it's doing a good job of not looking super shaky. So yeah, my hands are shaking like crazy right now, but the phone's camera is doing pretty well. I'm seriously considering using these as my primary YouTube cameras for A-roll now, just because they are honestly amazing. So that's a general overview of the device, the pros and some of the cons. But now let's get into the nasty stuff. What don't I like about this phone? Well, the first two have already been discussed. Bixby is still not great, and the battery life is subpar at best. But those aren't the most annoying parts of the phone. Firstly, the front-facing camera, while being 8 megapixels, has quite honestly bad photo quality. I'm not an avid selfie taker, but if you are, that might concern you. Second off, the fingerprint sensor is in a terrible position. It's hard to reach, and just not in a great spot. Center back would have been a better place to put it, like almost every other Android flagship smartphone this year. Not only is this placing absurd, but the sensor itself is also not that great. It might be my finger's problem, as dry skin might change the way that the sensor detects my fingerprint, but since I've gotten the phone, I've had to reset my fingerprint way too many times that I should have. I've only had it for around 2 or 3 months, yet I think I've reset my fingerprint like 15 times now. For the same finger. Not only that, but when I'm unlocking my phone, I often have to readjust my finger several times to actually get it to unlock. Overall, the fingerprint sensor is just infuriating. The glass on the back isn't that great either, Within a month, I already noticed scratches, and not just minor ones, but major ones. And I didn't really even do anything with it either. The most I did would be put it on the table or putting it in my pocket. I am going to end up with a dbrand skin on it, so that problem is solved, but still, it's a bit annoying. So, what are my final thoughts then? The S8 is a great phone. It's powerful, looks good, and has a great display, decent battery life, and an amazing camera. And for someone looking for a new flagship, it's honestly quite great. However, if any of the compromises listed prior sound like something that would tick you off, maybe look toward other options. The Android flagship market is booming, and while the Pixel 2 XL has an array of issues, phones like the LG V30 or others are still out there. In all, the S8 is a great package with a few compromises, but it should serve well for a smartphone for most people. Anyways guys, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you hated it, go ahead and dislike. And if you want to see more videos from us, please subscribe. We'd appreciate it. And while you're at it, why not leave a comment down below on what you think about the phone? Do any of these issues sound like they'd affect you? Let us know. And if you want to see a What's on My Phone video, go ahead and let us know as well. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Wired out.